call for the opening of this pre-agenda meeting for the Siloam Springs Board of Directors, September 13, 2023. Roll call.
Blair.
Yet here.
Wiley.
Here.
Wiles.
Here.
Hunt.
Here.
Whistler.
Here.
Allen.
Here.
Carroll.
Here.
Thank you all. So at this time, this is strictly a pre-agenda meeting for our directors. There is no public input time. So with that, I will turn this over to our administrator and the directors.
There we go. I'll learn that sooner or later, turn that on and off. I got that. But thank you to all the directors for being here today. I'm excited about the pre-agenda. The goal is for us is to be able to ask questions about the agenda, the upcoming agenda. Staff will be here and make themselves available for any questions. My goal is to answer questions today where hopefully during our board meetings next Tuesday, things will run smoothly. It'll give us time to bring questions or your answers to your questions to you by the board meeting, where, again, just to give you enough information to make the decision what's best for the city. It'll be an hour and a half time limit, no public comment. The board will not be voting on anything. Again, it's pre-agenda for questions and board members. Once we get through the agenda, it is my hope that we can get through the agenda in 45 minutes to an hour, hopefully sooner. After that, our first board meeting, our first pre-agenda meeting, Kevin Moore will give a presentation on drainage projects, what we're doing, what's budgeted, what's coming up in the future. He'll go through, we'll explain everything there just to give you a better understanding where we're at as a city on drainage projects and the order that we have them in. So with that, I will turn it over to Renee. We'll go through the first agenda item and questions. She didn't know that was coming. Or I could just do that myself, Renee. So our first is call to order, our roll call, our prayer, and our pledge of allegiance. And then we will go to public input. On the consent agenda, A will be the town hall meeting minutes of August 24, 2023. You will see a revised agenda. Again, we have to add the minutes from this meeting. So what we'll do going forward, we won't have to revise it. We will actually make an agenda item for the minutes, and we'll just add that into the meeting. Any questions there? Dedication utility easements, 3300 block of South Elm Street. Any questions there? D, Resolution 5223, Final Plat Development Permit, Stubbs Subdivision, 2603 South Lincoln Street. E, Resolution 5323, Final Plat Development Permit, The Commons Edition, 2000 block of Dawn Hill Road. F, Resolution 5423, Final Plat Development Permit, Mission Hills Phase 2, 4000 block of North Country Club Road. Resolution 5523, Final Plat Development Permit, Fox Meadow Subdivision, 700 block of East Lake Francis Drive. H, Resolution 5623, setting hearing date for easement and alleyway vacation, 800 block of East Jefferson Street. And I, Resolution 5723, waive signage ordinance, approve MOU runway group. Any questions in consent agenda that you'd like to discuss? If not, we'll move on to the contracts and approvals. J, contract Sager Creek Improvement, Freeze Nichols and Company for $510,100. And staff, Travis and Kevin, will make themselves available for comments there if you have questions.
Do we have to say like Madam Mayor and all of that, or just
No,
ask?
no, this is
Okay.
strictly
Okay.
open floor for you all.
I was not on the board last year when this was discussed. I guess I'm a little surprised by this because I thought the 500,000 that was supposed to be for something else, and then somebody said, let's use it for this. I thought that was supposed to be for the work done, not just engineer drawings and schematics and all of that. If this is the price tag on just schematics, which again, I'm a little confused because I thought it was going to be for work actually done. When did that change, or am I confused, which I could be? And what kind of price tag are we talking about for the actual work if just the schematics is over $500,000? And actually, and I have another question, which I'll wait and let you answer that first.
Yes, so at the, one of the last board meetings, I believe in 2022, when there was discussion of a previous grant that had come to the city for some work, at that meeting, I think $500,000 was committed for this work on Sager Creek. And so the board goal for 2023, 2024 was for staff to, I'll just read from the board goal here, to prioritize and implement the recommendations of the Sager Creek Advisory Committee. And so there was $500,000 set aside to do that. The way that that was prioritized was to look at stabilizing this rock, really big rock overhang, doing these structural repairs there, repairs to the historic dam, replacement of the existing fountains, and then moving on in subsequent years as money became available to completing some of the what I call quality of life benefits. This would be the potential river walk, replacing of the pedestrian bridge, things like that. In the previous study that was done, there were some opinion of cost in there, and I think that's where that $500,000 initially came from. However, this would be a very large project. If everything that was laid out here was built, it'd be a very large project. The engineering for a project of that scale would come in at about this cost.
So if the engineering alone is 500,000, are we looking at a $20 million project? Because, I mean, for the East Main, 235,000 just for the drawing, and it's going to be over 10 million. So, I mean, would that be accurate to say we're
Well,
looking at 20 million?
It would be hard for me to say. I would be surprised if it was approaching 20 million. And I think Kevin would also be surprised if it was approaching anywhere close to 20 million.
10, 15?
It would be, go ahead, Kevin. It'd be hard to say without this.
Typically, you're looking at about 15% of the cost of the project being for the design and survey and everything itself. So I would anticipate, as long as there are no major changes to the scope, if they don't get in and find anything drastic that needs to be added, I would anticipate $5 million probably for all the improvements.
Of course, if you've ever done a home project, you know it doesn't work like that, but okay.
I did want to note that there are kind of two levels of work that they're doing in the scope of work. Some are construction drawings. So, that's getting us to shovel-ready plans. Those are significantly more expensive because there's a lot of engineering that goes into that. And those are prioritized just for these big structural improvements that were kind of outlined by the board as we want to tackle these first. So those are being taken all the way to construction drawings that could be bid out. And then the next layer down is getting us to conceptual designs for some of these things that would have a big emotional tie for the city and that the citizens would likely want input on. So these would be things like, again, a potential river walk, repairing the fountains, and then potential rehabilitation of the historic Twin Springs. Those would require kind of a couple of iterations of public input to eventually get to a place where we could then go to construction drawings.
Madam Mayor? Oh, Bexley, I'm sorry, are you?
Thank you. So then, where does the money come from? general, street, quality of life? Where is all this money gonna come from?
For construction or for this contract?
Both.
But this contract is in the Parks and Recreation budget for 2023. So that's where this funding would come from. And that's one of the things that'll be proposed in the conceptual drawings would be, a scale of if you do the least expensive thing, here's what their opinion of cost is, going all the way up. They'll give us various options. The funding for construction could potentially come from various places. It's not out of the question to look for grants for some of those things further down the road. And I don't know, Kevin, if you've got answers on where, just for some of these structural things, where that funding may come from.
Nothing additional other than that. So just capital improvement projects over the next decade, probably.
Yeah, sorry, going over messages I've been sent. So this is a lot of money. And we're looking at tens of millions of dollars in drainage and flooding repairs that need to be done that have been kicked down the road till the point where now they're major issues. Streets, some of them need to be completely ripped up and redone, sidewalks. Yeah, I just have citizens who are concerned about spending millions more on another project when these other things that have been kicked down the road this far are looking at years out in the budget. So that's everything. David?
Thank you. I recall, Travis, what you're talking about, that there was some project that we decided not to pursue, and Brad was sitting over there, and Brad was on this Sacred Creek Advisory Committee, and we all said, well, Brad, there's 500,000. And we all, it was accepted that would go towards that, and it was budgeted. But I believe that the board thought that would be the cost to do the entire creek, to fix it. No one that I know of thought 500,000 was just going to be the engineering and drawing. And in fact, we've had one workshop on this, July of 22, where the advisory committee had reviewed the past studies, that some of them go back to 2005. The most recent was April of 21. And none of these companies that had previously done them, there were 4 of them, were Freese and Nichols. But the cost estimate, now this was only a year ago, stabilizing the rock overhang was $125,000, repairing the dam was $30,000, upgrading the fountains was $215,000, the Maxwell Street wall maintenance was $50,000, the pedestrian bridge maintenance was $25,000 because it's in fairly good shape. The Upper Spring rehabilitation had 2 big question marks for its cost estimate, and the Riverwalk had 2 big question marks. But even the things that have numbers total $445,000. And I believe the $500,000 that was mentioned was understood by this board to be the cost to do the project. If we're talking a project that is in the millions, this is something that before a contract is brought to us, we have to be informed. Because we just heard at the last board meeting, some people want to spend $10 million on East Main. Now there's $5 million at least for redoing Sager Creek. Now I can assure you, this board has wanted to do fixing of Sager Creek for decades. It was brought up by James Fuller in the 90s. It was a pet project of his, going back how important it was. And every time it's been studied, people talk about kicking the can down the road on East Main. Well, this project has been kicked down the road over and over and over. But it's because previous administrations and previous boards have found other things that needed to go first. It was a board goal. It was something I believe we all have wanted to pursue. But as I said, I think we thought it was going to be a much more reasonable cost. And so I don't want to kick the thing down the road, but this is a want. East Main is a want. There are things in this community that are necessities for the average citizen to get by every day, and that's drainage, fixing streets that cause damage to vehicles, whether it's an overlay or something new. But we've also got sidewalks that are crumbling that are causing liability problems for the city. Streets like Harvard that have no sidewalk at all. I can't believe how many years this has been brought up and still nothing has been done. And that's something that people are walking in the streets to go get their groceries. So I'd like to know, what is the name of the other company that turned in a bid for this?
The other company was Alliance Technical Group.
Alliance Technical Group. And what was the reason that they did not cut the mustard?
Their statement of qualifications was much less customized towards the structural needs that we were asking for the project. Alliance Technical Group has actually done some work for the city in the past out at City Lake and even on Sager Creek with some of the rehab, but their statement of qualifications didn't include any dam work or any major retaining wall work like what we were looking for here.
Well, I find it odd that the same company that handled our comprehensive plan, right? Freese and Nichols did the comprehensive plan. Isn't that correct?
Possibly. I apologize. I'm not sure.
I don't know why they would be qualified to do this when they did the comprehensive plan for $235,000. And I can assure you, I wasn't impressed with the work on that whatsoever. I've been involved in this board with 3 comprehensive plans. The first was in the 90s, cost us $35,000. The second was when I was mayor in 2009, 2010, and it cost us $50,000. And when I got on this board and saw that we had spent nearly $250,000 to a company to do a comprehensive plan, basically hire a consultant, I was dumbfounded. Nearly 5 times the amount that had last been spent, and that was for the 2030 comprehensive plan. So I know that our planning department did a great deal of the work that Freese and Nichols was supposed to do for the comprehensive plan. They may claim that they are great to do this, but I think they've been too cozy with the planning department, and I don't think that they're the ones to go perform this. I think we need to open this up and look at the RFQ and see if there's some things that need to be changed, because there's 4 other companies that have done studies on this Sager Creek, and I'm wondering why they would not be putting in an RFQ or answering our RFQ. So I think that some of the decisions on this came about before you 2 guys were in your positions, and I think that that this is something that is far beyond our capability right now to spend millions of dollars. I would love for the Riverwalk to be done. It's awesome. It looks beautiful. It's something that, you know, when you can look at what San Antonio did with their Riverwalk, and there was some other city locally that has it as well. Who isn't? I can't remember. That has something similar. But, I mean, if that's going to raise this thing up to millions of dollars when we've already seen that what we were estimating a year ago was less than $500,000, I can't support it. And I will not support anything by Freese and Nichols, period.
So,
And-
oh, uh, so David mentioned like the $125,000 for the overhang. I know all that was at a workshop before I was on the board. Can I
But it was
get-
only a year ago, just
Right.
1 year ago.
Can I get those figures somewhere of what it was?
They're in the agenda back, but yeah, we should be
Okay.
able to, Renee.
Okay. I mean, so then that's a thought. Why the things that have to be done now, spend that 500,000 on them, and then work on the major drainage and flooding and sidewalks and all of that, but do the things that have to be done now and save for the river walk, which would be really cool and all of that. So anyway, Lisa.
I would say that we have more priority in maybe stabilizing the rock overhang. I'm not, I think a river walk, a design for a river walk would be really nice, but I don't know that we need to do that right now, especially if we're watching our pennies, which I think we should be. But if we've got some structural repairs on the wall that needs to be done, things that are absolutely needing to be done, I think we should do that. But if we're talking about beautification right now, I think we hold off on that.
That's what I was gonna ask. The other engineering, they proposed more aesthetics than structural, is that what you're saying?
Their qualifications were centered more around studies and rehabilitation
Okay,
than
the creek
actual-
water and stuff like
than
that.
civil drawings and
Okay.
work.
Can you explain for the audience, because not everybody has been part of this project from the beginning, and it's not fair to kind of, we tend to do this in meetings, and I notice sometimes citizens are like, we didn't even know what you were talking about, because you guys know the history. I don't know the history. So what is the structural need for Sager Creek?
So the structural needs for Sager Creek are the rock overhang, which is on the west side around the bend, west of downtown, kind of up the hill. So that's eroding out from underneath the hill. The kind of the portion underneath the water that you can't see has been creeping further into the structure of the hill over time.
And what happens when we let that go?
That would eventually possibly collapse the
So
hill.
where the moss house, it can collapse, cause that to collapse. Okay.
Possibly, yes. So the other needs are repairs to the dam because it's leaking, and then also we've had some trouble with the gates, the gate operation of the dam, and then the wall along Maxwell Street east of the Twin Springs Park also has some structural needs, tree growing out of it and things like that that need to be addressed.
Okay, is it at a spot that it's dangerous for the community?
Not to my knowledge, but I would have to go back and look at the previous studies.
And the fountains, are they not working?
They are working. There's an opportunity for fountains that do a better job of improving the aeration to the creek, so we would see less of an algae bloom or shorter periods of algae bloom each summer by replacing the fountains. So the issue that we have right now is there's one intake for all those fountains, and so instead of circulating the water all across that area, it's all kind of condensed in one spot. So what we would be looking at is something either like a self-operating fountain or multiple intakes that would provide better water quality for the creek.
Okay. And I kind of agree with Director Allen and Director Smiley when they were talking about last year, the numbers that we were given. How did we go from that to wanting to do it as a project that this is just the engineering work? Because if there's a need for that wall, spending that type of money is understandable. But then how do you go to the public and say, oh, well, we're not spending it on the actual need, we're just spending it on the engineering? So that's what we're being asked to do. So can you guys explain it to us how we are supposed to ask the citizens that, to support that?
Yes. So my understanding is that the direction from the board was to pursue a contract that brought all the items set forth in the Sager Creek Committee's study in 2021.
Did somebody give us estimates on the work? Where did those numbers come from before? And I know you've been working in the department, but it probably wasn't your project. But where did those numbers come from that we were given before?
Justin Bland led the workshop on this.
Yes, yeah, Justin led the workshop, and I think the committee kind of derived those numbers based off of previous studies that had been done.
Can the city do any of the work?
If I could jump in real quick, I was on the Sager Creek Advisory Committee previous to working for the city, and those numbers came. The goal of that Sager Creek Advisory Committee was to look back at the previous 25 years of studies that had been done, sort of harmonize the recommendations that have been made in those studies, and bring those recommendations to this board. The most recent study was in 2021, and why the name of the firm that did it is escaping me right now, but that's pretty easily accessible.
Integrated something.
Okay. They did, again, the work that they did was not engineering level. They weren't producing construction documents. They were doing inspections of creek infrastructure and saying, hey, here's our recommendations for repairs to some of this stuff. And then, again, long-term improvement. Now, they provided opinions of cost, and that's where these numbers came from. I think both staff and Freeze and Nichols that we talked to immediately came to the conclusion those numbers were extremely, extremely low. And so to Kevin's point, to get to a place where anybody could build any of these, let's say, for instance, if we were just to do the rock overhang, that structural part, to get to that point, no matter what, whether the city was doing the work or anybody was doing the work, we'd have to have these engineering drawings done to get to that point. And again, that's typically about 12 to 15% of the overall cost of a project. And so there was $500,000 budgeted in this year, a lot of that coming from the most recent studies, opinion of cost. Unfortunately, without really doing construction drawings, it is hard for that to be terribly accurate.
Right.
And so getting to construction drawings gives you a very clear sense of this is what it will cost to build it.
Right. And I understand the goal of that. But if you took the 500,000 and you said that rock overhang, it's vital that we fix it because there's things that the community can't see underneath that's going on. But if you took that money and you said, okay, we're going to get an engineer to tell us what needs to be done there, by the time you pay the engineer, you'd have enough money to do that project with that $500,000.
So if on the back side of the staff report, there is a breakdown of the scope and fee of the project with F&I. And so to do the construction drawings to do the dam, which is a much smaller project, the majority is that rock overhang. The engineering for that's about $185,000. And then along with that, you've got a project management fee. And then you would also have to do your H&H and floodplain, making sure you're not causing a rise in the base flood elevation. So you're quickly, just for the engineering for that component alone, you're quickly getting over $200,000 just for that. And I would expect construction would be significantly higher.
But you'd still be ahead if you just spent it on what the needs are and not wants. If you separated the needs from the wants, that cost is going to be a lot less than.
And that's how it's broken out here in this scope and fee. So you can see pretty quickly from the board goals in 2023 and 2024 that this board produced, the order in which we were asked to go about prioritizing. And so this scope and fee prioritizes in that order of getting to construction drawings on just the structural items. And then, of course, your conceptual stuff is a small percentage of cost of that. It's the engineering that's the most expensive, and that's what's reflected in the scope and fee here.
I'm like Director Smiley. I think we need to take care of the overhang. It's a need. And if you think the bridge is a danger to our community, then we probably need to look at it. But I think that we need to look at the needs first and eliminate the wants for right now. We're wanting to add departments, we're wanting to add employees, we're wanting to fix our drainage, we're wanting to fix our streets, we're wanting to fix our sidewalks. We're not a bank. The money has to come from somewhere, and it's coming from the citizens who can't even afford to pay their utility bills now. How much money are we gonna ask from them, you know? That's where I stand, is we are spreading our citizens thin on money, on their tax dollars, when we're getting hit hard on, there's projects that should have been done a long time ago that haven't been done, that have been, like I said, people's homes flooding, streets that tear your car up, and sidewalks that my nephew, who has cerebral palsy, who sometimes uses a wheelchair and sometimes he uses a walker, and he cannot walk on sidewalks in our community, which is sad. That's a need for people who are disabled. We became a pro-life city for people that are disabled or elderly, the unborn. We became a pro-life city that says we are going to take the responsibility of providing what these people need, and that's one of the things that is needed in our community.
That pedestrian bridge was the least worrisome on the list from the committee because they said it was in pretty good shape. That's why it was only $25,000. I watched the workshop from last year, and that was not a big worry. In the proposal you gave to the board packet, the project schedule, this page right here, Travis, to review the list of all the things that Freese would be doing for $500,000. Project management, site inspection and survey, dam design, rock overhang design, Maxwell Street wall scope development, pedestrian bridge concept, fountain concept, Riverwalk/Twin Springs concepts, H&H floodplain assessment, and then a report. Again, I think this is a lot of stuff that our citizens' money's being spent on, but it's vapor. I mean, it's work that they go do in order for us to get the actual physical change to the creek being done. That they have to have all this engineering work, and a lot of it, to me, is really just throwing everything at them and saying, you do it all, and you question, is there not something that could be done in-house? I mean, watching the workshop, the pictures that were very similar to this that were put in the workshop, a lot of them had drawings on them by Justin or whoever in the planning department. And you just say, is there not some things that we could do? I mean, the dam is not about to break. It's in poor shape, and everybody realizes that it needs work. But the rock overhang needs done now, especially when you see the picture of it with no water in the creek at all. It just gets deeper and deeper and deeper every time we have a flood, especially. And you sit here wondering, how long can this, it's like a bluff in a cave system. Like, how long is it going to be able to last? We don't know. But by golly, as soon as possible, we need to start putting some concrete or something under there to support it, because it is getting to where that thing is just hanging out, and it's what do you call it, erosion more and more underneath. That's by far the most important thing we need to be addressing for safety concern, not just for our creek to be maintained, but also for everything above it. In that, not just in that area, but it could affect the bridge, the Mount Olive Bridge. It could affect a lot because everything's connected. So that, I think, is the number one thing we need to look at.
Kevin or
In this-
Travis? Go ahead.
Go ahead. You haven't talked.
I have a vague recollection of there being some issues with some of the businesses downtown flooding a little bit, at least one of them. And I don't know if any of this work is related to that, but will any of the proposed task help with that? Or is my recollection incorrect on that even being an issue?
I'm going to hazard a guess here, only because I was on that committee. There was one business owner downtown who I don't believe is there anymore, that when the creek would get really high, would sometimes have issues with his basement taking on water.
Right.
Not up in the business itself, but that underground basement. Now, I don't know if that was from old drain pipes that drain to the creek and then back up, or if it's just the groundwater. But no, this project wouldn't do anything to mitigate
Okay.
any sort of groundwater intrusion into any basements downtown.
And
then,
it
of
was
course,
just one that I was aware of, so we're probably talking about the
I
same
think
one.
we're
'cause it was
probably
a
thinking of the
basement
same
issue.
one.
Okay, so these projects wouldn't really help with
No,
that. This
these
is
would
separate.
be, again, primarily to address the structural problems that were identified by the previous group, prioritizing the overhang, the Maxwell Street wall, which is in really bad shape, and the dam, which is in pretty bad shape. And then, of course, the thing that I think united the Sager Creek Advisory Committee was the fact that, if you Google Siloam Springs, the pictures that come up are that whole area. And I think it's probably the most sort of culturally important area to folks in the city, just as your picture in your mind of Siloam. And so I think amongst the board at that time and amongst folks on the committee, there was a desire to try, and as long as we were in here doing all this structural work, having a firm that's already mobilized to do that at one time, having them look at some of these, other concepts that the community could really get behind. Because, again, the truth about the dam overhang is it's extremely expensive, and nobody will ever see it, and because it's always underwater. And so I think there was also some desire to, while we're in here, be able to give some what you might call wins for folks that get to enjoy his quality of life quickly, whether that's the rehabilitation of the old Twin Springs that folks really, take a lot of pride in, or some other small thing like that, trying to repair and replace the fountains. They're extremely old and starting to fail and get plugged up and aren't really adding any water quality benefit, which was one of the primary goals of that 2023-2024 board goal, was to recognize both the kind of cultural and environmental importance of Sager Creek, and that's how we came to this prioritization and this scope and fee.
And I really appreciate that you are thinking in those terms, whether it be short-term or long-term plans that will sort of help with the quality of life and just the beautification, again, whether that's now or later. I do know that we do have a lot of other priorities right now, but I do encourage us to continue to think about those things. And hopefully at some point it won't be an either or. It feels a lot right now like we can either do this or do that. And I understand needs versus wants, but I also understand long term for Siloam Springs, the more we can do to attract people to the area, the more sales tax dollars we're going to get, the more property tax dollars we're going to get, the better off we're going to do as a city financially. And maybe then we can start looking at those kinds of projects more seriously. But I guess my point is just, I appreciate that you are thinking about those things, and we may have to wait on them. We also have to keep in mind that we are always going to have the issues that we need to address right now. And that's why I say hopefully at some point we can get to, we're not going to have to say one or the other. Maybe we can address the needs while also addressing some of the wants that I think ultimately will help the city of Siloam and will help the residents of Siloam. That's my opinion.
When I look at Phase 1 summary, and what is listed at the very beginning is that upgrades that are more aesthetic in nature, which is the pedestrian bridge, the river walk, the Twin Springs, and the fountain system, I think as Director Hunt, and I appreciate what she has said because I agree with that. These are aesthetics, but they don't really pertain to any structural part of that. So I'm just wondering if there's some things that we can eliminate temporarily and then add back on. I know you don't want to do piecemeal, but we only have so much that we can work with.
Right, and I think it's worth mentioning that as the construction drawings are finished, we can certainly prioritize only the structural improvements first. What they'll be putting together will not be one lump sum $5 million package. And so the design is all lumped together, and I think that's staff's recommendation still at this point, is to lump all that design together, because we're looking at only about 150,000 of that being for the aesthetic portion. But then as the contract is ready for the overhang, as the contract is ready for the wall, those would be bid out and constructed prior to any of the aesthetic improvements being done.
I appreciate that. I think that is a good way to go. Thank you.
Kevin, you've already answered a lot of my questions, and I appreciate that. I too was not on the board when this first came up. It does seem like the board, because I sat in the audience last year when all this was discussed, it does seem like there was some misleading going on, whether, just misunderstanding of dollars or whatever, because everybody I talked to as well thought, oh, $500,000 to do the whole thing, that's, doesn't sound too awfully bad. And again, you've answered a lot of the questions that I had, but the overhang, I guess, is probably the most critical project we're looking at right now. Is that right? Would you say?
I think that's probably fair, but they also weren't necessarily thinking of it as an emergency when we were talking to them, just based on their review of the study. It's not like it's gonna collapse within the next
right.
however long.
And I guess where I'm, it would be good to, for me, I'm thinking, and I agree with what all's been said, the aesthetics are nice, but we cannot discuss that right now. We just don't have the funds. But you talk about the dam, you talk about the overhang, the walking bridge, and then the wall. So I guess, am I leaving anything out? Oh, no, the fountains. So we've got 5 projects that are sounding like are needs that have to be taken care of. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay. So, and it sounds like the overhang is the most critical, even though it may not be imminent. And so that's kind of where I'm going on the overhang. How critical would you, 1 to 5? Is it a 3? Is it 1, 5 being it's got to be done like tomorrow? Or are we still at 1? I mean, knowing that it has to be done, but yet we've got some time to do that. And I know that kind of puts you on the spot, but we've got 5 projects that it sounds like everybody's saying, well, okay, let's look at those in phases, or let's take them one at a time. And so I guess I would like to hear, of those 5, what do we need to look at first? Maybe it's the wall, maybe it's the pedestrian bridge. And so that might help focus attention and, on that. And we're all talking about the wall or the overhang, but maybe that's not where we need to start. And that's, I guess, my question. Is that where we need to start, or is it one of the others, or 2 or 3 of the others?
I believe a couple caveats. I'm not a structural engineer, and when you're dealing with a lot of moving water, things can happen quickly. And what I mean by that is it could last 15 years, or we could get 9 inches of rain tomorrow, and it could last 2 years. So I would rank the Maxwell Street wall and the overhang equally, simply because they're both structural issues and kind of outside looking in. I believe that those are both things that absolutely need to be addressed.
It would probably be helpful for us to bring to y'all the language from the most recent study, because that's where they got into the most detail about that firm's assessment of the danger. My recollection of reading it, again, was similar to Kevin's, is that they weren't so much worried that it was going to collapse tomorrow, but it's one of these things that if it collapsed would be catastrophic, particularly for the folks that live above that bluff. And so that was why the firm recommended this, I think, highest as something to be addressed. And then I think the Sager Creek Advisory Committee and then this board also said, yeah, we might ought to address that. And I'll read quickly the language from the FNI contract because I think it borrows from the previous study. So most of the bluff visible from the above normal bankful water surface appears to be intact limestone bedrock, but there's a layer near the bottom of the bluff below normal water level that is a softer material. That softer material has eroded and left an overhang of the harder rock. There's concern about the integrity of the overlying rock given the loss of support from the softer layer. Large-scale raveling of this bluff could create a public safety issue. And again, it is, without being a structural engineer, it'd be very hard to say exactly when something like that might happen. You have the old man in the mountain that everybody thought would be there forever up in the northeast. That was the state emblem that collapsed. So it's somewhat hard to say, but I think the firm that did this study felt that it was, if it were to collapse, it's a big enough public safety issue that it should be prioritized.
Well, I think it needs to be done, and I'd like to take care of it as soon as possible, which I guess gets into some other things, and we don't have to discuss it now. But if, moving forward, how long is it going to take them to do these, get to the construction drawing phase? And then after that, how soon would it be before that would be something we could get started on?
Their initial project schedule is approximately 14 months to finish construction drawings. And then again, moving towards, bidding it out and construction would be dependent on where we're at in the fiscal year and the money that's appropriated by the board. And then again, looking at how this is funded. So it would be 14 months until construction drawings were finished.
Now, is that for everything, or just if we said we just want the overhang taken care of right now and first, that would be 14 months before we would know?
In the current design, that would take about 14 months, only because the two things we asked for construction drawings in this scope of work were the dam design, which was, again, that's a fairly small project, but then the rock overhang. And again, the engineering and the surveying and the flood modeling that goes along with that, that's the time-consuming part. So, some of the other conceptual elements that are worked into this are sort of done in concert with this, but the heavy lifting, which is reflected in the cost, is all the engineering specifically for these structural components.
Thank you.
I would be curious or in favor of moving forward for the overhang in the Maxwell Street, if you think those really are the priority. I understand aesthetics. I like for things to look pretty. I understand attracting people and tax money and all of that. But like I said before, so much stuff has been kicked down the road that right now, as far as quality of life, I think I'm looking at the people who live here now, not the people bringing in other people. I want to focus on what's absolutely needed, the streets, the drainage. Quality of life to me is even the rec center. That would benefit the youth, the elderly, the Manna Center, everybody. And I just can't support moving forward with all of it right now.
Is there anything else on the agenda? I appreciate your guidance and
I
input.
had one other thing to say. I want to make sure the public understands, that staff understands that we as a board have not said this is not a board goal. This has been a board goal, without a doubt. And without a doubt, the board, is interested. It's been talked about for decades, and they want to see this done. And there's no doubt that this was budgeted, but I think we budgeted it thinking that was the entire cost to do the physical work. I think that we need to go back and, to the drawing board. I think sometimes we put the cart before the horse, and we assume how a board of directors of the past might have automatically approved a project. Every time a new board member is elected, it's a new board of directors. Even just one new member becomes a new board of directors. Now we have a new city administrator, and it's a different ballgame, really, in that we can't just be expected to not be kept in the loop and understood that if we understood 500,000 to be told that this is only for engineering, that is not what the board was understanding when we approved the budget last year. So I'm just saying, did the board previously approve to go out for the RFQs?
The board doesn't necessarily need to approve the
Well,
RFQ
that's not the way it's been in
itself.
the past, but I'm saying that may need to change because it's a different board, different city administrator, and to blindside us of something of this magnitude, especially when we report to the public $5 million, how are people going to react when, as Lisa said, they are having trouble paying their electric bill? Some people, they couldn't care less about Sager Creek. I do. I know a lot of people who do. But if it's going to be a higher electric bill when they're having trouble deciding between rent and groceries, they're not going to care if it's clean, if it's held up, or whatever. And so this was kind of a blindside, at least to me, to know that this 500,000 was only for engineering and design. It was reminiscent to me of the $1.5 million economic development thing where we had the workshop at the beginning and we're expected to vote on it that evening. So we've got to be involved a little more of, and I mean, not a sentence at the bottom of an administrator's report and not the sentence at the bottom of a Parks Department report, but an actual report saying, letting you guys know that this is the way this is looking, so that we're kept up to date, to see what their job would be, and that's only potentially 1/10 or 1/15 of what it will end up costing, especially after we just heard about the needs to some business owners. It again, the people that have trouble paying their bills don't care about East Main, but these are wants, and we've got to get back to covering the needs. Well, just out of curiosity, what was the amount of bid for the Alliance Group?
There was no bid, so this was a qualifications process, and cost cannot come into that when professional services are involved. So we put out a request for qualifications. They submit their statements of qualifications, and we go through those and rank typically top 3, and then begin negotiations with the top ranked person. And if we fail to come to some sort of agreement, then you move down the list. But cost cannot come into account for professional services.
Because I've seen this before where other departments or other, and not necessarily here, but where we tend to write something to favor a company that we've done business with before and that we have a good relationship or something. Lisa, at one time you had said there's a big difference between an RFQ and what was the other one? RFP? Request for proposal. Does that not actually have a dollar amount?
Yeah, the RFP will tell you the dollar amount and the scope of work. An RFQ just tells you what qualifies them.
And from what I had heard before I got back on the board, when I sat in the audience, you had asked Mr. Patterson for doing RFPs instead of RFQs because you get a better idea of the scope of the project and the cost of the project. And he just said he wasn't going to do that. Is that right?
My personal opinion is an RFP, you get the qualifications from an RFP because you list the details of the job and you know if they can do it, you know if they know what they're talking about. But you get the cost also, so you kind of know what direction. If you have $500,000 difference, you kind of know what direction to go in. It gives you more details. But
Well, if you don't know the cost and you only choose based upon what each person rated or whatever.
Right. That is the state requirement for selecting
I understand,
professional services.
I understand, but I'm saying without knowing the cost, I mean, this other company could have been 100,000. And without knowing the cost, whereas if you had an RFP, you would know their qualification and you would know the cost. So, I think we need to relook at that as well because we're not getting the full picture. We're responsible for spending the taxpayer money wisely and getting the best bang for the buck. And I feel like $500,000 just for engineering design is way, way out of the ballpark.
I'm not sure I quite understand what direction we're asking you to go. So if you all do, congratulations. And I understand you probably want to understand that before we continue. But related and yet unrelated, based on these conversations and so many others we've had recently where we've talked about board goals and how it's not this board or I wasn't on the board when this, I would like to propose that we start setting goals every year or 6 months or whatever, because we are sending you all on these wild goose chases, trying to get all the information you need to fulfill these goals that we have set before you. And then you're coming back to us to give us exactly what we ask you to do, and we're saying, sorry, that wasn't us that asked for that. So if we could start doing these goals every 6 months, every year, whatever, so that it's always a current board, because I feel like we have wasted a lot of your time over the last year or two, and I hate that for you all. And ultimately, it's not good for any of us. You all have spent a lot of work on this project, and what I'm hearing is start over again. And that's too bad.
And I think you read my mind. What we'll be doing going forward, next meeting, the pre-agenda meeting on September 27th, the topic will be board goals, because this is a concern of mine that we're setting goals 3 and 4 years out. We're getting those. The board changes, and it's confusing to staff. So our 27th meeting will be talking about goals. How do you want to do those goals? Do you want to do a yearly, 2 years? Again, it just will help us. So that'll be our next topic, but we've got to get moving on because we still have a presentation. So again, I appreciate your input and guidance. I've got my notes. And then October 11th pre-agenda meeting, we will be talking about streets and sidewalks, just where again, going forward. But Kevin, if you want to start your presentation, I've got a couple handouts for you.
Thank you for answering our questions. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And for doing what we asked you to do at some point.
So while those are passed out, you've got 2 sheets. One is a spreadsheet ranking all of our projects. The other is a map. On the back side of that map, the projects are numbered as well. So you've got 2 sides to each of those. Couple things to look at. The zeros at the top are projects that have either already been completed by staff or are budgeted for this year. And then when we get into the numbered projects, those are ones that we believe justify spending public funds. And so we'll go through those just kind of based off of either the risk that they represent or the number of people that they affect. Anything marked as construction, those are complaints that we've received adjacent to active construction, like a subdivision or something going in. So those aren't ones that we're currently working on, other than to facilitate some sort of resolution between the developer and the owner. And then we have some that are in evaluation, either because we haven't had a good chance to view those in the rain, or for whatever reason have not had a chance to meet with the homeowner. And then anything private, staff feels does not justify spending public funds on, but we can go over those as well. The first couple projects that we're going to look at. So to get us started, we've got 1107 North Hyco Street here on your map. This is one that was completed by staff this summer. We installed a grate north of the existing duplex to help drain that area.
So Kevin, this is just drainage, is that right?
Yes, these are all drainage projects.
Let me ask you, does the numbers signify the priority
Yes.
on the left-hand side?
Yes, so the numbers on the left-hand side, zeros are either they've already been addressed or budgeted for this year, and then 1 through 17 are future projects that we believe justify public funds.
The board also,
They're in order of your priority.
Yeah, in order of staff's ranking, that's correct.
my apologies, Director, but if, I know you guys are watching your handouts, but you also watch the screen. It'll give you a better overview of which topic he's talking about, and then we can ask questions based off that.
Yes, so, and thank you. Then we'll revisit several of these. So 1107 North Hyco, that's one that we have resolved with City Crews. Over on Ridgeview, sinkhole opened up in the back of this yard. Come to find out, the contractor that built the subdivision stubbed a storm line north where there was no proposed storm line. Instead of properly removing it, they just covered it up. About 4 years later, sinkhole opened up, so staff has properly abandoned that line, and that's been resolved. Complaint on Weymouth Court. This would be a MS4 complaint instead of a drainage complaint. There's a water quality issue with some sort of film on the water coming from the pond, and so that's something that staff will sample and try to determine where that water's coming from. Less of a drainage complaint, again, and more of a water quality complaint. On Oak Hill Street, this is north of Harvard. We've got some erosion in this area along the fence lines that staff plans to address this year with construction crews. And then Brentwood, of course, which you awarded the contract for at the last board meeting. And now getting into projects that we're actively designing. We have a meeting Thursday. Initially, this was going to be designed by an outside firm, but our engineering department's a little bit ahead, and so I believe we'll be able to design this in-house. So this project is along Dogwood Street on the west side next to Harbor Freight. We'd be looking at concrete lining that ditch and doing stormwater improvements also underneath Tulsa Street. East Central duplexes, this is another budgeted project for this year. The driveways that were put in, everything kind of surface flowed over the driveway, but as people have parked on the edge of the street and things like that, that no longer functions. So staff would be, the design currently is to install a grade inlet between each of those yards, and then we are currently trying to get quotes for this project. We've had a lot of trouble getting quotes for anything really less than about $80,000. It's been really hard to get contractors interested on smaller projects, so you may see this come before you as a bid wrapped up with multiple drainage projects, so be keeping an eye out for that. Jefferson Drainage, this is a recently designed project where concrete matting was put in, and for one reason or another, improper matting was selected for this portion of the project, and the velocities exceeded the design strength of that material, and that has begun to peel up in storm events. So that is budgeted for this year for a design to fix that and then coordinate with Corps of Engineers. Tulsa.
Where is that at on Jefferson?
That is between Jefferson and Twin Springs, west of this is Holly Street right here. So, and that's between Jefferson and Twin Springs, west of Holly. So, and then the old high school is off that way. Tulsa Middle School, the old high school, we would be lumping these projects together. So one designed for along Dogwood Street, and then as it crosses the middle school, there's a culvert there today. old metal culvert that's corroding and has actually collapsed. About a week ago, a lawnmower actually fell through that culvert, and so staff would be working probably with city crews to fix that area. Those are the budgeted projects for this year. So now we're starting to look into future projects that staff is proposing. The top 3 projects are areas where the water actually overtops streets. And so since these are a danger to cars and staff actually has to go out and close some of these bridges, those are the top 3 projects. So it's important to note these are all really major projects. And so even though they're the top 3, they won't be the first 3 completed. So looking at North Country Club, so there's a house where Mudcat Creek and Sager Creek combine. That house is in a floodplain and it floods occasionally. One option would be to purchase that house kind of as a near-term fix. The long-term fix would be for an outside firm to come in and design improvements at, improvements at Country Club, at the railroad, at Lincoln Street. We've got 2 pedestrian bridges, and then Heiko Street. A little over half a mile of improvements with multiple bridges, railroad involvement, Corps of Engineers, FEMA, wetlands, kind of everything involved. And so that's why staff is proposing that this would be an outside firm. And part of what they would need to look at is the floodplain impact that has downstream, because we can't just open all these up to the maximum extent possible and send all that water downtown uncontrolled and make the floodplain worse in that area. So major studies involved with multiple bridge improvements for that project.
This is the one you estimate at 10 million?
Yes, I'm essentially kind of 2 million per bridge plus the improvements in between. That's just an estimate with no real engineering behind it, of course.
Good luck with the railroad company. They're always fun.
On to University Street. So this is another one where the water overtops the street. This is our number 2 project. Staff is proposing currently, you'll see in the budget for next year, $375,000 for design of this project. And that would be for the existing culvert beside the Parks and Rec building, all the way south to at least Twin Springs, looking at improvements through that area. This splits, it goes east to Mount Olive, and then it also goes west and south to Harvard Street and then to Tulsa Street. So improvements at any of those locations would require and would need to be considered for the improvements in this area. And then also they would have to consider the impact that would have on Sager Creek if they opened it up across University. And then project number 3, this is the third area where we kind of regularly have to close the street. This is at Jefferson behind the new maintenance shop. The issue with this one is I do not understand why we have no drainage complaints north of Jefferson Street on this draw. And my assumption is that that's so undersized it's preventing issues to the north. And so an outside firm would be tasked with examining that whole area as well. Again, across the railroad, things of that nature, looking at that. Out of the kind of dangerous projects, we're looking at South Point subdivision. Staff is proposing $350,000 for next year's budget for improvements along South Point. There is a culvert between the 2 sides of the detention pond that's actually backwards, preventing that from functioning properly. And then the culvert underneath Highway 59 is undersized, so we would be increasing that and then defining a ditch all the way west to the railroad, and then driveway and culvert improvements north and south along Lincoln Street. Again, we'll be proposing $350,000 for this, and we would combine that. So this is our number 4 project, And then I believe our number 14 project, just here to the north, they have a standing water issue that we would be able to address at the same time. The last project that we're proposing for next year is a possible detention pond that would serve both the Ashley Park and Meadowbrook subdivisions, kind of south of where those sit. A lot of the houses, especially in Meadowbrook, were built too low compared to their backyard and compared to the farmland to the south. And so any rain that they get just sheet flows, travels across the surface and threatens those homes. So we would be looking at ditch improvements to capture the water kind of along both sides, and then a detention pond that would serve that whole area. Another possibility would be to lower this existing line. It was not constructed as designed, whether because they encountered rock or for some other reason, staff's not sure. But that line is too high to properly drain off the Meadowbrook subdivision to the west. 809 East University, we're looking at water that comes up between two duplexes and it hops the street and goes into the house to the north. So we'd be constructing a box and then culvert to pipe that water where it's already going, not really changing the flow, just burying it so that it doesn't go into the house. Kind of a smaller project there. On Abraham Drive, we have a house that has had repeated complaints over the years, despite multiple projects in that area. We've looked at we've evaluated several options. One would be to construct a detention pond to the north, and that would help. But even then, the water that falls on the street in front of the house just sits there and doesn't have anywhere to go. And so even if we take care of the bulk of that water, it's still not going to fix the issue. And so staff would be proposing to actually just purchase that house and then do away with it and expand the existing detention pond that's right next door.
Is this the one that has been a problem from day one?
Yes, that's correct. So it's been a repeated issue. Back kind of downtown, there is the house at the northeast corner of Ashley and Maple. This is another one. The culverts in that area just get overwhelmed. Everything west of Mount Olive drains through College Street and onto those. The two boxes with a back opening, and those boxes combine, so it's really not functioning at its full capacity. So staff has already designed this project, and we would either be bidding it out with a future budget or budget amendment or doing the work in-house with city crews. Just adding a culvert to separate those boxes so that they're both fully functioning to mitigate that issue. Over on East Main, we have a project where next to GNS Shoes, this alleyway here, the water that's on Main Street hops down that alleyway and then into and around the back of this house. So staff this is another one that's designed and would be waiting on funding. We would be building an apron at that alleyway and directing the water essentially one more block west where it can be handled along Hill Street. Over on Highway 43, this is one that came up during some of the Oak Hill subdivision discussions. So immediately west of that project, west of Mount Olive Street, we have a major draw. This is where the floodplain begins in this area. And the water seems to pretty closely match the floodplain design. To staff's knowledge and to the owners that I've spoken with, it has never actually entered any of those structures. It just is a risk and a comfort issue. With the amount of water that we'd be dealing with there, directing that west would at least need to go to Villa View, which is a little over half a mile, about 0.6 miles. It could require a project that goes all the way to the Oklahoma border, which would be a little over a mile of improvements. So that's another major project. Staff's estimating about $3 million, I believe, is the number I gave you for that one. That one again has a pretty variable scope involved.
You mean Villaview Addition, not the street, right?
The street,
Really?
yes, so it'd be 0.6 miles. It's 0.6 miles.
So it goes west and then comes south?
It goes west and south, actually, onto JBU's property, I believe, and then continues west to Oklahoma. And that whole portion is floodplain.
And this is the one you're saying on Sycamore Heights that's in the county.
Correct, yes.
And these properties or street issues, drainage issues that are in the county are on your list because it's been determined that the issues that they are having is somehow related to what the city's doing.
Not in this case. So that's this one's on the list mostly because of the city limits kind of to the south in this area. And so it would be kind of one project to address all of that. At one point, we were looking at annexing this in as well, which would keep it on our radar. As of right now, with it being in the county, so I've pointed them towards Illinois River Watershed Partnership for kind of an erosion mitigation project. But as far as a future capacity improvement project, the city's concern would be Highway 43 and then whatever changes that caused downstream of that project. So, but that is on our list, even though currently that property's in the county.
And then when it goes south onto JBU, it then affects our property at the sewer plant. Is that right?
Yes, that's that same draw. And it is, so one of the two complaining property owners is county and then the other is city. So that's,
Will you be
they're
able to
listed
get
together.
county money to assist on that?
If we were to do the project today, I would expect some sort of partnership. But this is, I believe that's number 10 on your list. So this would be kind of well down. Yeah. Over south of downtown on Madison Street, this is east of Mount Olive here. Several ditches that are undersized and they really just have some efficiency and capacity issues. So this would likely need a project that would take the water all the way west to Mount Olive. The reason it's so low on the list is it's not currently threatening any houses. The house that we get complaints about today, the house itself does not flood. The garage that was constructed a couple feet lower is what floods. And so that's why it's a little lower on the list, even though there's an actual structure flooding. Staff has been out there multiple times to clean the ditch and improve that area, but it needs upgrades to function in the long term. Back over to Meadowbrook, this time on the north side. The floodplain starts over here kind of by Don Hill and goes that way. So this is an area that gets a large amount of water, even though this property is not officially in the floodplain. There's not a whole lot that can be done about the amount of water that they're seeing. And the complaint is mostly trash that gets piled up on the fence and causes some overflow issues. That's been kind of a code enforcement repeated where the city has stepped in from a code enforcement aspect. And then they're also seeing some erosion, and the erosion is what I believe the city would get involved in as a public project. And then while we're looking at this area, we would also look at the benefits that a detention pond south, like we discussed earlier, would provide, and then making sure that the other detention ponds in the area are functioning properly. Walnut Grove Farms, north of Carly Crossing and Lawless Ranch. They're seeing some erosion issues. And so this is one that staff is currently looking at to determine whether the pond there is functioning properly and whether that can be reduced in some way to mitigate the amount of water that they're seeing. Back over to Lincoln Street. Again, this is number 14 on the list, but it would be lumped in with the South Point improvements we're proposing for next year. over on Maple Leaf Avenue. Two projects, one's private, but one is public. So there's a grate inlet where the ground has settled around the grate and it's no longer draining any water. And so the fix would be to basically chop off the top of that inlet and reconstruct it at the proper grade to get that functioning again. The private issue is a groundwater complaint that might be helped by what we're doing with the grate, but ultimately I think that neighbor would need to install a French drain, and that's a conversation that we've had with them. Over on College Street, the complaint is on the east side of College where it turns to Granite. There's currently there's no culvert in that area, and so all the water surface flows across Granite Street. And then, so we would be looking to add a culvert to get that area functioning properly. And then while staff was out there, we also noticed that one of these houses had built in like a brick and rock area in the drainage ditch that may be holding back some water. So that's something that we'll keep an eye on and make sure that if it's restricting the flow in any way, that it would be removed to get that area functioning properly again. The last public project on our list, over just west of Atwoods. This is an area that's had standing water issues for quite a long time, but the Atwoods site, they oversized their detention pond, but the entire site drains south and west now instead of split like it was before, part of it north of the house and part of it south of the house. So even with small rain events, they're seeing that standing water more so than they used to see in the past. And so a couple options. This is one that we're currently designing, working with the owner and RDOT to come up with a solution that everybody's happy with. And I think we can get something. There's multiple options to redirect that water. But those are all the public projects that we have. These are all based off of complaints since October when I took over as city engineer. And so there may be some that have kind of fallen off staff's radar over the years that aren't on this list, but this is the bulk of what we've received since then. And I can answer any questions, and if we have time, we can move on to talk about some of the private ones as well. But if you have any questions about public projects, I'd be happy to answer those.
So 6 through 17, are those budgeted for 2025, or do you know at this point?
Not at this point. So my intent would be to design most of those next year and essentially either come before the board with budget amendments if they're small enough that we could get them done, or they would basically be ready to go for whatever year they ended up budgeted.
Okay, because, I mean, just on this first page, the ones you have numbers with, it's over 20 million. Yeah, so.
It's a lot. And I would like to mention, so that major project, that huge one that involves all the bridges and everything, when we do hire that out, they may analyze all that and come to a point and say there's nothing we can do that doesn't affect the floodplain further down. And so then we would have to make a decision whether to continue forward with that project to keep the water from overtopping those bridges, or if we wanted to leave it kind of as it is today with understanding that we have to continue to close those streets.
Just for the board's understanding, this year we have 5 projects in the budget. Our goal, and we're on track to complete 3 of those. We're also on track to do two designs. The next year, I've given direction to staff that I don't want to see things in the budget that we don't have a chance to complete that are unattainable. So you may see more budget amendments as the year goes as we complete projects. Our goal as a staff is to, as we design, I think, is it, Kevin, 3 more in the budget next year?
3 in the budget. So 2 that we would be designing this year but may not finish construction on. And then we would have 2 major projects that we are proposing to design in-house and construct next year, and then 1, the university project, we're proposing to have a firm design next year.
So that could be anywhere from 5 to 7 drainage projects that can be completed in 23 and 24. We want you to know it is our priority, and as we complete the projects, we may come back ask for budget amendments to start new projects, not just in drainage, but streets. We'll have the, I'm setting the same standard there. I just, instead of just having money sitting in budget we're not using, we want to make sure that we're completing projects, and because a lot of times it's our goal to complete them, but we get pulled off to do so many other things. So again, that's kind of our goal right now.
Kevin, this is a really, really nice report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And-
It's
and-
a lot of work.
I'll just tell everybody else with staff, pretty pictures like this, squiggly lines and stuff. No, really, it is helpful, Kevin. Thank you very much. No, this is nice for us to be able to reference, and I know it says September 2023, and that, it doesn't mean just, but it's a snapshot, and it's a nice, to follow with the actual spreadsheet, and so, thank you very much.
It's easy to read.
Pardon?
It's easy to read.
It's easy to read, yep.
And understand.
Even with our glasses, we can, but it's good.
That's good.
Thank you.
And as we go forward, I will probably bring Kevin back and we will touch more on the drainage. We're just trying to be transparent with the board and the citizens on what we're doing, what we have planned going forward. This will be a part of our master drainage project and plan. So again, if there's not any other questions, we're about on time, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed this meeting. It's been informative. It's helped staff. It helps with direction. Megan?
Just real quick, it's been about 3 weeks since we had our town hall meeting. A few of you did come and attend that meeting, and you got to hear some of the surveyors and applicants speak about our process. I don't know if the others have had a chance to go back and watch that meeting, but if you haven't, please go back and watch that. Planning is just waiting for a direction from the board. So when you guys are ready to give us some kind of direction on what you want us to do with those comments that we received at that meeting, we are on standby for y'all. So be thinking on that.
So can we have a discussion or meeting about that, or what's appropriate to make changes?
You could send me an email and I'll forward it to, or CC me, send your thoughts to planning. Because again, we've been talking about this as staff, and just to get direction from that meeting. I know when the new community development director comes in, we're going to be looking at some code changes and ordinance changes and different things like that to make things a little more fluid.
I know Jim had some good suggestions, and I think,
Yeah.
didn't you say you were starting on some of them? Or?
Well, and some of the things we've already started to address that Jim had mentioned, or it has been addressed, but there's some other things that I know right now the surveyors are pretty happy. They feel like they've been heard. But if we just sit on our hands, I don't think it's going to be a good outcome. I would prefer someone to give that meeting.
You have a list you could provide us?
That list that Jim handed out at the meeting kind of covered everything that was in the survey results that I covered. Yeah, and so he sent that to me last week so that we could put it in the minutes for the meeting, because we are doing those minutes.
We did
Yeah.
get those.
Yeah, I specifically asked him for them so that it was accurate in the minutes.
So that you're thinking about?
Yeah,
Just
so.
the ones that he suggested, was there not any others from anybody else that?
No, I mean, that was kind of the whole rundown of the main point of the presentation was what Jim had suggested. But we can go back and look and see if there's any missing from, I can go back to the PowerPoint and look and see if there's any missing.
I'm seeing the 6 suggestions that he made in the minutes that Renee prepared for, or whoever prepared for that town hall meeting. And so I guess I think it would be helpful if you all think those are doable, maybe in a staff report. I don't know if you can still include it for the next meeting, but either the next meeting or the week before, just say, yes, we recommend these, and this is why, or this is why we don't think this will work. Would that be doable?
I agree with Director Hunt. We want to know what you think, just because it sounds good to us. You're the professionals.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, this
Maybe a
is your
status on what you're already doing to implement some of this?
If I may, hopefully we won't have a packed agenda in our next pre-agenda meeting. I can have Megan come in and talk with, because goals shouldn't take too long, and we can also do something that night. This setup for me is a time to meet with you. The entire staff is here to talk with you, see where you want to go. It's a chance that we can talk and we can plan and then try to do things that are best for our city.
Also,
Bring her back.
if any of you guys had questions on the final plats, sorry, I thought this meeting started at 3:30. So if you had questions on the final plats, I'm here for that too.
I wasn't
They
able to make it,
didn't.
but I got halfway through the video and got interrupted. But I heard from other people that you guys did a really professional job.
Yeah, it turned out really good. Everyone had a good time. I feel like we created some bonds that weren't there before, and so I think the meeting went really well, and I think we have a good direction to go in. I just want to not sit on our hands with that. So,
I think that would be helpful. You tell us what you think would
okay.
work with that.
Okay, yep, I'll bring that to the next pre-agenda board meeting. Also, just a reminder, Hispanic Heritage is this weekend. Please come out to that. Me and Megan put a lot into this event, so please come out. It'll be fun.
2 o'clock at Memorial Park, starts from
2
to
p.m. to 8, yep.
Megan said this is one of the busiest months she's ever been experienced.
It's been-
September.
It's been absolutely insane, and I mean, we've been kind of on it all together, and it's hard with planning to be doing that, so it's kind of been crazy.
Friday, fourth Friday, the following weekend, right? Yeah. Yeah, and that's the one that's new that people are not aware of. Love Siloam. Yeah. What'd you say? Glitter?
Litter. If you want to pick up litter, we are taking volunteers.
Litter. Yes. Yes.
We did something last year, because I remember walking with trash bags.
So we're just adding more to it, more kind of Hart, Simmons, the chamber, we've all come together. We're going to have a community picnic. Starts about 11 o'clock with 2 concerts with Greggy Nichols at 11 and the Butler Creek Boys at 2. And there will also be a proclamation read by our mayor at 12:30.
Are you advertising those music?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been focusing on getting volunteers. The next 2 weeks will be the concerts.
Thank you for
Kenny
your
G
work.
and some country.
Thank you for your work on all of those. And because we've been talking about board goals, even the Heritage Festival is something that helps to meet one of our goals, just to be more culturally aware and sensitive. And I think that's a great way to do that.
We have had a lot of fun putting it together this year, so it's been great. But that's all I have for planning.
What's amazing is I asked Megan the other day, "You got plenty of help?" She says, "I have more volunteers than I can use." So thank you to the community.
Good.
And before we close, just being in this chair the last 4 weeks, I just want to let you guys know we have an amazing staff. I am seeing a different scope of what these folks do in this room and how hard they work for our citizens. And I just want to tell them a big thank you, because I'm getting to see a lot of behind the scenes of what they do and the things they do every day. So, thank you to them. And before we close, also, just to let the board know, because I've got some calls, I have, staff has reached out to the Attorney Lancaster. We've left a voice message. Last meeting, he said he would have us a resolution today. We still haven't seen anything, so we have reached out and left a voice message, and we've been here for a while, so we haven't had a return call. So as we do, I'll let the board know.
I will also say, Alan, hearing you tell us how enlightening it has been for you to actually meet one-on-one with every department and hear things they wish would have been different, things they like, things it's enlightened you, and I think it's been a big plus that you've been able to do that, especially for staff to feel open communication, wide open, and I think that's important.
So we have everything? Then this pre-agenda meeting is adjourned.